Vito Salonga, a distinguished Filipino politician, returns home from nearly 4 years in exile. He arrives with one mission in mind: to create an effective opposition to end the rule of Ferdinand Marcos, the president of the Philippines. Salonga is a former senator, a leader of the Liberal Party, and one of the many politicians once detained by the Marcos government. Like most of Marcos' opponents, Salonga believes that now is a critical time for the opposition to organize itself, if it's to stand any chance of succeeding Marcos in the years to come.
It's my fate to die by an assassin's bullet, so be it.
Salonga's return has a special meaning. He followed the same route as Benigno Aquino, who was gunned down on his arrival in Manila 18 months ago. Aquino too was returning to challenge Marcos' rule. Salonga honored Aquino's death by choosing the exact day of the shooting, the 21st, to make his political comeback.
For indeed, as one philosopher
Salonga doesn't have the same stature as Aquino, but as an elder statesman, he could become a rallying point for the opposition.
The last 12 years have taught us a lesson we would like to share with you today. We do not and cannot deserve freedom unless we are prepared to work for it, fight for it, suffer for it, and if necessary, die for it.
Ferdinand Marcos, with his wife Imelda at his side, reviews a memorial to the liberation of the Philippines 40 years ago. For nearly half that time, he's ruled the country virtually single-handed. Officially, his presidency runs for another 2 years. But Marcos' frail health and the political problems he faces have led many to believe that a change at the top must come before then. Marcos himself has denied that he'll step down and call an early election. His opponents fear he might, in an attempt to offer the country a successor of his own choosing.
I am not modest, and I wear all my decorations as a soldier.
Uncertainty about the leadership has mobilized at least one wing of the opposition. Members of the Aquino family have joined other leading opponents like veteran campaigner Lorenzo Tanyada to try to agree on their successor to Marcos. They've named 11 people from whom they'd select a candidate if a quick election were called. A large number of politicians and businessmen are trying to unite against
the
Marcos.
credibility of Mr. Marcos' regime, if there is still credibility.
Alphabetical. Eh, sino titindig na una?
Personal ambition and different party views, though, have always split the opposition in the past. Salvador Laurel, the opposition leader in Parliament, says he'll run for the presidency whether he's selected by the Aquino group or not.
But he told me,
Eva Collor of the Liberal Party is another critic of the Aquino movement. She says their rules for selecting a candidate are undemocratic.
However, if he says, I am running before the
Collor
convention,
and Laurel seem set on their own routes to the presidency.
To the unity of the opposition.
The divisions among Marcos' opponents work to his advantage. In last year's elections, when his credibility was at its lowest after Aquino's death, the opposition missed its best chance yet to defeat him. While they argued among themselves about whether to take part or not, Marcos and his party swept back the power. There were charges of ballot rigging and unfair procedures, but Marcos dismissed them and won a clear majority just when his fortunes had seemed on the slide. Marcos' popularity has always been highest in the rural communities where he himself grew up. He spent his childhood here in Surat, northern Luzon, the largest of the Philippines' 7,000 islands. His mother was the daughter of a rich landowning family and a teacher. Under her guidance, the young Marcos excelled at school and later at university. His father was a politician and a strict disciplinarian who encouraged his son to box and wrestle. With a strong political background, Marcos seemed destined for the same career. Once in Parliament, Marcos rose swiftly through the ranks of the Liberal Party. In 1965, he became president, beating the incumbent in an election still remembered as the most bitter ever fought. His campaign to crack down on smuggling, to cut prices and to get rid of government extravagance won him many votes. Filipinos viewed their new first family as a fresh, dynamic force. A Kennedy-style era had begun. By 1970, though, Marcos' popularity began to fade. Student unrest and demonstrations at rising prices became widespread. In the countryside, his troops faced a growing threat from the outlawed New People's Army, one of several rebel groups with support in the outlying islands. Claiming that he faced the violent overthrow of his government, Marcos imposed martial law in September 1972. His critics saw it merely as a way for him to hold on to power, but Marcos himself was unrepentant.
The Constitution of the Philippines is an articulation of what the people desire. And in that Constitution is included the exercise by the President of the powers that I am exercising now under the conditions thereof. Those conditions are that there is the threat or there is invasion, insurrection, rebellion, or imminent danger thereof.
Under martial law, political dissent was stopped. Critics of the administration were detained, while trusted supporters were promoted to top posts in government, business, and the military establishment. The attempt to curb the general lawlessness that had become part of Filipino life was welcomed at first, but the ban on political activity was deeply resented. It was during these years that the role of the First Lady, Imelda Marcos, grew. She's a former beauty queen who was quick to learn the rules of politics. She traded on her easy rapport with the people and devoted her energies to worthy social projects. Not all of this worked for her. At times, she was hugely extravagant, out of touch with millions of poor Filipinos. Nevertheless, as governor of Metro Manila and a cabinet minister, she holds huge political influence and is often seen as a successor should Marcos step aside. Marcos came under increasing pressure to return to democracy. An interim assembly was elected. But with some of his opponents still detained, the vote was largely discredited. By January 1981, Marcos told the nation law and order had been restored.
It is after deliberate, sober judgment and soul searching that I come before you and say, it is now time to terminate martial law.
By a swift stroke of the pen, Marcos kept all the powers he had held under martial law. The power to rule by decree, to order arrests, and shut down the media. Nothing, it seemed, had really changed. He then ran again for president. America, represented by Vice President George Bush, publicly backed Marcos, viewing the end of martial law as a victory for democracy. Ferdinand Marcos successfully secured for himself an unprecedented time in office, amid protests of fraud from the opposition and a charge from one critic that it was no more than a stupendous ego trip.
The unswerving allegiance to the vision which unites us all.
The single event which did more damage to Marcos' career than anything else was the killing of Benigno Aquino. This mass rally was just one of thousands that took place. Aquino's assassination turned him into a national hero overnight. The Aquino cult swept millions of people along with it. Those afraid to speak out during martial law joined the biggest public demonstrations the Marcos government had ever seen. They pressed on towards the presidential palace, demanding that Aquino's assassins be brought to trial. The inquiry into Aquino's murder was controversial from the start. This five-member panel under Corazon Agrava was set up after doubts that an earlier commission was not impartial. Although Agrava was known to be a friend of the president's wife, her tough questioning through 10 long months reassured the critics.
As Exhibit 309.
Hours of testimony from hundreds of witnesses, including General Fabian Ver, the head of the armed forces, led to one firm conclusion, that Aquino was shot by his escorts and not by a lone communist gunman, as the government at first insisted.
We will abide by whatever this honorable war finds.
There was confusion still to come. On the eve of its verdict, the commission could not agree. Chairman Agrava issued one report, the rest of the panel another. Agrava's report named 7 soldiers, the most senior being the head of the airport security, Brigadier General Luther Custodio. This outcome was largely seen as one which the president could survive and which would not bring the armed forces into disrepute.
Ascertained regarding the killing of Senator Benigno Aquino on August 21, 1983.
The rest of the panel held General Ver responsible and blamed a further 25 military men. In effect, the majority of the panel pointed straight to the heart of the Marcos regime by naming the president's closest advisor.
Thank you very much. Yes, the report has been submitted. What did the president say?
Aquino's relatives and supporters, notably his widow Corazon Aquino, remained skeptical that justice would be done.
It is just that with Mr. Marcos still in power, I really find it impossible to obtain the justice that I am looking for. So I will still wait until after Mr. Marcos is no longer head of our government.
Do you believe that President Marcos ordered the assassination of your husband?
Yes, I do. It's just that, as I said before, I do not have any concrete proof.
Thank you.
The indictment of General Ver did follow, and for many, that implicates the president as well. Ver has been Marcos' trusted aide since the days of martial law. Many believe that a military plan to kill Marcos' main political rival could not have been carried out without the orders of the president himself. Jaime Ongpin is a leading Philippines businessman who was once a supporter of President Marcos. The Aquino killing has changed his view. He now thinks Marcos is totally discredited.
I suppose you can say that he has survived because he remains in office. But clearly his authority, particularly his moral authority, has almost completely disintegrated, in my opinion. I don't think you can find too many Filipinos today who respect Mr. Marcos's authority. He's still president of the country, but as far as his ability to lead, the nation and to inspire confidence is concerned, I believe most of that has disintegrated.
If Marcos is somehow weathering the storm of the Aquino affair, it's become harder for him to avoid the issue of his own health. His acute kidney disease is believed to be getting worse. Recently, Marcos gave a jovial public display to counter reports that he had undergone major surgery. With no clear successor in view, the issue of how long the president's health can hold out is now a matter of national importance. Marcos now rarely appears in public. With rumors that his health is failing fast, television pictures like these have been shown to reassure the public that he's carrying on. There's no quick cure either for the country's ailing economy. Under Marcos, it's moved from being one of the fastest growing economies in the region to one of the slowest. Since Aquino, it's virtually collapsed. The International Monetary Fund now calls the tune to help the Philippines meet its $25 billion debt, owed to more than 400 foreign banks. For ordinary Filipinos, the future looks grim. New austerity measures are likely to affect their pockets for years to come. News of rising inflation and unemployment go side by side with reports that Marcos' old enemy, the Communist New People's Army, has also regained its strength. In recent weeks, the NPA has stepped up raids and ambushes in Mindanao, the country's second largest island. The NPA has considerable local support, making the army's task of containing the rebellion more difficult. President Marcos sometimes plays down the threat of rebellion and at other times expresses great alarm. The widely held view is that the NPA will continue to grow so long as Marcos remains in power. Whether Marcos will keep going or disappear from the scene remains at the heart of the current debate. For the United States, his major ally, it's become a crucial issue. America's 2 bases in the Philippines are the center of its huge defense operation in the Pacific. Some of the opposition don't like the US presence and want the bases to go. Marcos' close ties with the US have ensured that the bases remain so long as he's in power. But it also means that the Americans have become linked to the increasingly unpopular Marcos regime. To the opposition, the demand for the removal of the bases is second only to the resignation of the president himself. The longer he clings to power, the harder it may become for Washington to deal with less friendly politicians who may succeed him. When Marcos came to power 20 years ago, he promised to make the nation great again. His vision of a new society is as strong now as it was then, but the realities of his leadership have charted a different course. The country's in political and economic turmoil. The goals that Marcos set for his country are unlikely to be reached for a long time. Like the unfinished monument of the man himself, Marcos' work will remain incomplete.